Hello everybody, welcome back to Wolfeei Extras. Today we're going to be looking at the MCC Reddit and a post on Twitter, or two posts on Twitter, that I thought were interesting to talk about. I just wanted to make a video, and I found some topics. So today we're going to be talking about MCC. No clue what this is going to be called as a video title or thumbnail. We're talking about MCC and some other stuff. First, a bit of unfortunate, not too unfortunate news. The Twitter poll will no longer be working, at least after April 15th, or starting April 15th, which is just really unfortunate, but hey, I guess we're going to be no longer relying on Twitter. I hope MCC moves their poll to MCC Live. That would be kind of poggers. So yeah, it's bad news because Twitter has good reach. It's good news because you just get Actually, it's good news because no longer can a person reply on Twitter and just get more traction to the post than their live viewers. So I guess if you want to know what your streamer is voting for, go watch the stream. So that one doesn't work anymore. Twitter poll is gone. Next up, MCC and the Marvel effect. I wanted to look at this one because it said, please let this be in the next Wolfeei Mogul Mill. I was just scrolling, I was reading this, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it said my name, so here we are. Basically, this post is talking about something called the Marvel effect. I'm not too familiar if that's an official term. What they're saying is, because certain really cool things happened in the past at a certain consistency, when they don't happen anymore, people are disappointed. For example, first example they make, newcomers. The end of Season 2, or the second Season 2, or Season 2B, or whatever you want to call it, had a decent amount of newcomers introduced. And obviously for Season 3 so far, we have had 2 sets of team reveals where there has been technically 1 newcomer, but some argue no newcomers, with Fire Breathman. And some people are disappointed. I know at the later end of MCC Season 2, there were also some events with no newcomers, and people were disappointed. Me being one of them, because I also expected people to be added at a certain consistency. And when there weren't many or any newcomers, people were a bit let down. So, yeah, it's a case where maybe the MCC audience is expecting too much, but I think, you know, it's unfortunate for MCC, I guess, because people will just complain when there's no new people, but the complaints that would that would result from adding too many newcomers would possibly be a little worse. So I think it's fine. Second point they make is the amount of updates that there are between events, being that at the start of MCC and MCC Season 2 and all that, there were a lot of really cool events because of the gameplay, and in more recent MCCs, the gameplay hasn't really been altered all too much, so some people are a little bit disappointed by that. Some people expect there to be more changes. Now, I happen to be one of few people who actually knows why certain things don't get updated that much, but I will not be saying so because it was a private conversation. But yeah, there's, you know, people expect too much now, and this bleeds in to other events as well, because of how good MCC is, events like Block Wars, Pandora's Box, Twitch Rivals, etc. suffer, because a lot of people that have consistently been watching MCC have a really high standard now because they think MCC is the standard, which it is not. MCC has definitely lifted the standard up a lot, but also other much worse events have lowered the standard significantly for an event to even be considered good. So, yeah, within MCC it's a problem. Not really a problem. Within MCC it can be seen as a little bit of a problem. Outside of MCC, MCC has also caused other events to suffer from it a little bit. Is that a bad thing? Nah. Kinda. It sucks for people that are starting because the expectation is super high, but overall it just means people make better events, so I think it's fine. And then next up, I saw my name mentioned again while scrolling, reworking the tier system. Then I don't know what this means. Let's see, a tier list is pretty cool, but in a lot of ways they really suck. People talk about talk past each other instead of to each other when debating tiers a lot. True. No one can agree of what exactly constitutes being any tier. True. I don't have the hubris to think I can fix this. Maybe. But I want to try to incorporate some things into the tier system that are important yet overlooked. Okay, I agree with Wolfeei on the stance that player tier lists are best used for assisting in team construction. That is, honestly, as much as it is an opinion, that is probably fact, because there is no other benefit. And so I'll be focusing more on players as members of a team rather than isolated individuals. Perfect. I think doing tier lists based on how good of a teammate someone is will make more sense, because then there's something to learn. If you're just saying, all right, S tier Fruit Berries and Fire Breath Man and Illumina because they are really good at Minecraft, F tier Connor Eats Pants and Slimesicle and whoever, RT Game and whatever, right? Those people at the bottom tier, if they were to really care, that all they can do is feel bad, or start like a villain arc where they just start grinding Minecraft every single day. It just doesn't help anyone, right? However, if you're like, all right, let's do a teamwork tier list, it would be a little better, where you're like, oh, well, a lot of people work really well in a team, where everyone would probably be at least like C tier, with exception for maybe like someone who just plays individually, which at that point, that's their own fault. And they should be low-key kind of called out for that, because if you don't work well in a team, what are you doing? Anyways, like a teamwork-based tier list would make more sense. Or if you consider that for how good someone is, then yeah, sure. So as the precursor post to the full breakdown, I want to make sure I'm addressing relevant issues with tier lists by asking you a couple of questions. What do tiers do well that I should leave alone during this process? Tiers, let's take a look. The thing with tiers is there's an easy way to distinguish a cutoff point in skill between certain people, or within skill, quality, talent, etc., right, in a tier list. Naming something S tier and naming something else A tier shows that between those two there's a significant gap. Whereas if you say, well, this is better than that, that doesn't really show how significant of a gap there is. What is something tiers poorly account for that I should look into? Within tiers, you can't really show off too well how big of a gap there is. Just putting two things next to each other in a tier list either means that they are of equal quality and are interchangeable, or one is better than the other, or one is worse than the other. You don't know how much worse or how much better one is. Another thing tiers poorly account for, in my opinion, is that, like I said, there's probably never enough tiers to properly show off how good or bad something is. Usually you would have S, A, B, C, D, E, F tier. That gives you 7 tiers to work with, if my math is correct. Sometimes you probably need more, and I think most people use less, because they usually, usually they use more. It's shown off by how people use it. There's S, A+, A, B+, B, C+, C, D+, D. There's just a plus everywhere. It's like a 0.5. So it's really hard to show off small like little gaps, and it's really easy to show off big gaps in quality, skill, or whatever. How quickly can someone's tier change based on an apparently uncharacteristic performance? A lot of people have flukes. I think it's a situation where they'll have to consistently do that, or for example, if I were to play and I get top 5 twice but 20th once, and I do that consistently, I shouldn't be seen as a top 5 player. I should be seen as someone who can get top 5, but that doesn't really mean that much, because I know there's probably a lot of people out there that are seen as people who could do really well, like a Rambu or a Filza probably, who have shown that they can do really well, but they don't consistently do that well. So you can't be like, oh, they had one really bad event, they're now a tier lower, if you were to want to care about tiers. So I don't think that's fair. I think 2 events is also still, depending on how much they've played, I think 2 events is also a bit early to guess. I also think external factors that aren't MCC related should be considered. For example, with someone like Harvey, he's gotten pretty unlucky with some performances, but we all know that Harvey is really good at Minecraft. Realistically, he should be a higher tier in quotations. Should tiers be more about raw performance or relative performance? That's a good question. It depends on the context. If you say raw performance, if you mean with raw performance, like, right, well, top 10, no matter how much of a difference there was to get top 10 equals S tier, then I would say raw performance, because relative performance is good too, but it depends on how relative. Because if you say, for example, relative to 5-up, Antfrost does better, thus Antfrost is a higher tier, sure, but there needs to be a certain raw performance that, like, establishes this person is that good. Like, the way we do it for Block Wars, we use tiers in team making. We have a certain score where, like, if you're above that score or average placement, the chance that you'll be considered as a quote-unquote top-tier player is pretty high, and usually that's like top 10. I think it's top 10. I don't remember exactly what we do, but anyone who has an average placement of top 10 or higher is considered quote-unquote S tier to Block Wars, because first of all, we don't have that many players. Well, actually, we do. We have a pretty significant amount of players, and also it just helps with balancing. That's just, I don't know. It's nice. It's been nice. It works. So that's my stance. Both. They should be about both. I guess relative is the most important, but raw performance should not be forgotten about. I've answered all of them. You're welcome. Next up, I've already been going for 12 minutes. Now we go to the quote-unquote controversial one. There was a thread on Twitter about hottest takes regarding the competitive scene in MCC, Block Wars, or Pandora's Box, and I'm referring to the actual events, not testing or MCCI, which is good. Testing in MCC Island should not be taken into consideration. My take was lower skill or less competitive Minecraft events are more entertaining to watch than high skill or more competitive ones, which I think for the most part is probably true. But fair arguments were made by Stu. I didn't talk with him, but he made some fair points. It's because some people will say that the more competitive ones are more fun. The main issue with that is that there aren't really any events that are fully full high skill competitive rosters. Those don't really exist. The closest event is Twitch Rivals, and even then there is pretty much always like a for fun team, or like a team that isn't really that strong. Making an event in a format like MCC, Block Wars, Pandora's Box, or even in a format like Minecraft, where everyone is good, would be really entertaining. Because it reminds me more of like old UHCs, like United UHC, or whatever UHC, like the old ones where it's super hyped to have like a fight between two really good players. Imagine that, but for every single fight. You know how cool that would be? That'd be awesome. It's just something that's not realistic to do. I think this person here made a fair argument. There's a much larger audience that comes with a mixed roster, that is true. And event organizers, if they had to choose between a popular event or an entertaining high skill or low skill event, you would probably go for the popularity one because it's just more beneficial. A lot of people said like Block Wars isn't the hardest event as a controversial hot take. It's not a hot take. It's not. It's not the hardest event. I titled it the hardest event in the past, and it got me a lot of views. I'm at fault for this because I was the first person to do it. I literally just did it for YouTube purposes. So, do I actually think Block Wars is the hardest event? No. No, it's not. It's probably Pandora's Box, if I'll be honest. There's just a very high learning curve, and the players are also very good. It's probably just the hardest event. Maybe they can lean into it. Maybe they should go for the competitive, entertaining one. Honestly, I think that would be really awesome. I know I'm pretty bad at it, but I would gladly get like bottom 5 if it meant that the event was like super entertaining and high skill. Any movement game with punching is F tier. True. MCC is the best player roster by far. I think that's pretty fair to say. They've just established their roster a lot further than other events have. For example, I mean, comparing Block Wars and PB, or MCC again, MCC is now 30 events down the road where they've gone for a content creator roster. Block Wars is currently entering its 5th event. By the time Block Wars is at 30, if we even get there, who knows? It's probably like 2 or 3 years away from now. By the time we get there, the chance that the Block Wars roster is comparable in coolness, in quotation, to MCC is pretty high. However, we don't know what the MCC roster is going to look like at that point. Maybe MCC will also not be around. Who knows? We won't know. PB is the hardest Minecraft event to win in. True. Oh yeah. And the Block Wars roster is sweatier than the Block Wars Origins roster. No. I don't really know how you can argue for that. That doesn't sound right at all. It depends on what you consider sweatier. Good players have a way easier time at doing good or doing well in the Block Wars roster than in the Origins roster because it's a higher skill. Thus, I also consider it to be sweatier, especially considering that a lot of the Origins players play a lot of Minecraft just casually, whereas a lot of the Block Wars roster, the creators, have other things to do. So, I don't think it's sweatier, but to each their own. Racing games are fundamentally flawed in all events due to knowledge differences. The only way to resolve this issue is to create a new map or map set for each season, never reusing any maps whatsoever. However, this isn't a reasonable amount of work. True! If you want racing games to actually be fair, then yeah, that would be a good approach. I agree with that. MCC SG is overrated. I like it, but when it's played early, the enjoyment goes down a lot. I think that's pretty fair. I think SG is the best played at the end of the event. Block Wars Hunt would be such a better game. They play in 2 different maps for... Hold up. Oh, Hunt would be such a better game if they play in 2 different maps for 2 rounds? Maybe. Hunt is just fundamentally flawed. You just sit still for 3 or 4 minutes. It's just not that interesting. Haunted Havoc at full potential could be on par with SOT? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think it's actually, funnily enough, I think Haunted Havoc kind of is like between Hunt and SOT, where the thing with Block Wars Hunt for me is that Hunt becomes way less enjoyable as a hunter for me personally than it is as a hider. I think in Haunted Havoc it's a similar situation where while being like a runner or like a ghost doing the puzzles, it's really fun. I think it's really fun. The moment you die and become a hunter, my enjoyment reduces significantly. It's maybe just personal preference, but I think people may agree with that. Block Wars Origins should have been named Block Wars, and Block Wars should have been named something else. I think, I mean, it's a somewhat hot take, but not too hot. I know a lot of the Origins players originally weren't too happy with the name change, but it just makes the most sense. It just makes the most sense to name the main showcase of the event Block Wars, and then name the secondary showcase of the event whatever other name you give it, right? I think Block Wars Origins is also a really good name. I think it has a nice sound to it, and I think people understand it pretty well, so yeah, I think that's fair. Shane also did this thread. He got a bit more responses from people who have played in more events, like Cubfan said, Twitch Rival selecting captains and doing a snake draft from all participants is the best way to select teams for events, and other events should experiment with this method. This is a really cool approach, however, there are flaws. I would love to do a draft Block Wars, or I'd love to see a draft MCC, but realistically, there are so many flaws. The main big flaw is that you have people that do not want to team with each other, and I would much rather respect the wishes for certain people to not be teamed, because, right, the way you could say like, oh, just don't pick them. some captains won't know. Some captains won't have control over it. And when you're live, saying on stream, hey, I don't want to team with this person, could lead to controversy. So that's a big flaw. Some people find issues with that. It just leads to audiences clashing, and that's just a big flaw. Balancing can also be a little off, but so is balancing and just making teams in general. One really good thing that I think snake drafting does is that people, rather than being able to team practice and really prepare kind of too much, now have to do it individually and then bring their own value to the table rather than being able to pre-plan strategies. I think it's good because it makes the event potentially a bit less sweaty. So yeah. Most people take it too seriously because of the pressure the audience put on them. They can't have fun with them. I think that's a fair thing to say. Individual average scores plus does not equal team placements. Yes, it helps, but basing the entire performance of teams by their numbers doesn't account for a lot of factors. True. I think that is true. It does pose a challenge. How do you properly determine how much of a good performance a team has done that way? It can be challenging, but I do agree that it's not entirely. It's definitely a little bit of a flawed system. I know I use individual averages or like individual placements on stuff for team making and for team predictions. I use that to determine like how good a team is. But that's kind of the only resource we have, so there's not really much else you could do. We need more unique games that aren't just PvP or some form of parkour, please and thank. Vouch. However, it's really hard to come up with those. It's really hard to come up with one that isn't either not possible to be made in Minecraft, really janky to be made in Minecraft, or boring. It's pretty difficult. People should play them for fun first. Not every event needs to be super sweaty. I agree. And we also need more ladies in Minecraft events. Yes, I vouch. Unfortunately, we live in a space where within the Minecraft community, the dominant side of viewership is mostly male sided, like the creator side. I think if you were to be able to reach out to non-Minecraft creators, like in offline TV, for example, you'd have a much easier time at getting high viewership female players. I still think, I've said this several times, I think having a better variety is always good, but I can understand why certain choices are made when it comes to who gets in and who doesn't get in, especially just because a lot of the Minecraft competitive scene is just very male dominant, and some audiences aren't exactly good at respecting women. So keep that one in mind. Noah has a little copy pasta. Every event should have proximity chat. No, and we're going to leave it off at that. Thank you all for watching. Hope you've had a good time. I was going to continue watching a Prince Zam video, so, I'm going to do that right now. Thank you all for watching. Go watch me live. I'm probably live today. So yeah, PogChamp.